we just are so steeped in like needing to be fixed or that there's a problem. There's just such a sense of like, oh, I think I have a lot of things, or I think I have too many things, or I think this is a really bad thing. And it's like, yeah, because that's what it's like to be in a human body. And especially that's what it's like to be in a body that cycles, that has distinct phases and weird complicated genetics. And when you get into it, like we all have things, I know you had your excision surgery. I have endo, I have PCOS. My husband has a genetic disorder. I think shifting from that sort of broken, fixing, problem kind of mindset to a like, this is what it means to be a messy whole human, and what is in service to me being the most resourced, abundant, alive version of that messy whole human.
What's up, ladies? Welcome to the health class She Deserves, where we talk all about women's health and bodies, how to know yourself better, and of course, our personal experiences. I'm your host, Autumn Payon, and today we are joined by acupuncturist, holistic educator, and pioneer in women's reproductive health care, Nicole Lange. Nicole began in genetics research but pivoted to traditional Chinese medicine, giving her a unique understanding of the physical, the emotional, and how they interact. From online courses to running her practice, Life Healing Life, in Minneapolis, Nicole provides heartfelt care and much-needed education around women's health and fertility, integrating modern science with ancient wisdom. Nicole, welcome to class.
Thanks, Autumn. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes, it's great to have you. So, as I mentioned in the intro, you began in genetics, a field focused on this very physically tiny aspect of life, and then made a pivot to traditional Chinese medicine, which has a whole body approach, right?
Yes.
So what facilitated that? Walk us through that.
And to be clear, it was the intent to be a geneticist. So I was not like a geneticist and then I quit my job and then became an acupuncturist. But when I was way back when I was little reading picture books, my favorite book was How Louis Pasteur Invented a Vaccine for Rabies. So I was just like I played scientist, I played orthodontist as a kid. I was a real science Western mainstream medicine nerd, all the AP science classes. And what facilitated the pivot was my own trauma. So I experienced a sexual assault and a failed suicide attempt after that assault. And Western medicine, which I still love, saved my life and got me stable. But I started to see the limitations of that very piecemeal, siloed, you take this thing for this other thing for this other part of your body, and so on, forever and ever and ever, whack-a-mole. And some of it helped a lot. Some of it didn't help much at all. Some of it made something else worse. And I was just sort of desperate to have somebody look at me as a person, especially as a person who had experienced something that really unmoored me and shook up my entire worldview, my entire way of being, and just to really acknowledge that and to be able to treat me from that framework. So I, through this really weird path, which we probably don't have time to get into, but I ended up, my grandpa was a motivational speaker. I saw him speak. I made this goal to do something that I'd really love, and it brought me to looking at Chinese medicine as a career. And I was also looking for that as on the patient side. And so I signed up, I applied and got accepted to multiple acupuncture master's degree programs, having had zero actual Chinese medicine and no knowledge of it, just kind of intrigued. So I was a very weird acupuncture student. And I think that's why I practice the way I do today. And I'm still kind of a weird acupuncturist, which I think is pretty rad.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like it's always great to see people doing things differently, especially in women's health, because it's just been so neglected for so long. Like, we need out of the box thinkers and people who are integrating a bunch of different
Yeah, it's not like we
modalities.
had it down and then I'm like, no, I'm going to do it different. It's like, wait, why am I being taught to do it that way? Because it's not great. It could
Yeah.
be a lot better. And so, yeah. And even from a Chinese medicine perspective, it was so cool to see this sort of multi-systemic mind-body medicine. These are two big categorical things that Western medicine has never had as a part of its foundation. It's very reductionistic. It's very siloed. And so those things were really great when I was in school, and they really changed how I understood my body, what I was doing, how I could get better. But then even in that education, it wasn't like, okay, and then you're going to explain that to patients. There was zero classes, just like in Western medicine training. There was zero classes on patient education. In fact, so much so that patient education in Chinese medicine continuing education categories is considered marketing.
Wow. That's so interesting.
Which is not okay. And I'm like, if not here, where?
Yeah, because that puts it in this perspective of I'm just trying to sell something, not educate a patient.
And I saw this quote when I was about a year into the program, and it was by one of the founding fathers of Chinese medicine. He's considered the sort of Hippocratic oath, the do no harm guy for Chinese medicine. His name is Sun Sim Miao. And he said a superior physician doesn't just treat disease, but teaches society and changes the intention of humanity. And I'm such a nerd. I was like in the library studying, and I saw that quote, and I was like, I felt like I just was hit by a lightning bolt. The hair stood up on my arms, and I was like, that's what I dig about this master's degree program. That's what I want to do. And so I was in the student clinic, and I was like, can I try some things? Can I do different things with my internship? And so I started doing reported findings and seeing fewer patients per shift than other students had historically seen. And it just really worked for me as a practitioner, worked for patients. And so I continue to do it 20 years later.
That's amazing. When did you decide that you wanted to focus specifically on fertility and women's health?
Yeah. So when I was an intern in school, I really wanted to do sexual health and reproductive trauma, sexual trauma. And I was talking to one of my really amazing mentors and teachers, and he was like, you might have to go to school to be a psychologist on top of an acupuncturist if you really exclusively want to do that. So I was like, well, I would love to, but also that doesn't seem reasonable after getting a master's degree, and the average acupuncture debt is around $100,000. So I'm like, maybe I'll be a little broader. So when I started my practice, I said I would only see women or people who identified as women, and only with either reproductive, sexual, or trauma concerns. And I told my husband I'll get a part-time job if I need to, but I'm not saying yes to anybody who's not looking for those things. And then within about 6 months, I had a wait list because I was not just sticking needles in people, I was doing all the education. And then word of mouth, fertility is really sexual, reproductive, and emotional health rolled into one. And so now, fast forward 20 years later, about probably at any moment, 85 to 90% of my patients are either trying to get pregnant or pregnant after significant challenges.
That's awesome. And I hear that a lot with other, Chinese medicine practitioners that I've talked to. Like fertility is such a big thing. Like you said, it's the intersection of those things. There's such an emotional component to it. As well as everything else. And it's one of those things that I do really think Western medicine is failing women a lot in that, not just because they label women as infertile and send them on their way. Also, when you get in, like IVF is such an incredible technology, and the price just keeps going up because it's not considered healthcare. It's considered a capitalist business.
Yep.
So
private owned, self-pay, and it feeds into the stigma of self-blame and shame and all this kind of bonkers stuff that we have culturally around fertility that we don't have around other complicated biological medical conditions, which fertility struggles absolutely are, but just are treated totally different. It's the closest thing to it is mental health, but even mental health has made some strides compared to where fertility is. It's really unfortunate because it is a disservice, and it does cause harm. It not only puts people back further and, sets them back timeline wise and progress wise, but it actually does harm to people by treating them so piecemeal and by increasing the stress and therefore activating fight or flight, which is the last place a person wants to get pregnant. So there may be very real medical conditions going on. But then if you put them in a system that compounds the stress in 15 different ways, financially, logistically, socially, spiritually, relationships, all of a sudden it's like we've taken this medical condition and we're making it harder to get success via the very way that we're attempting to treat it and the culture around that treatment. So my big mission by the time I retire is to change that culture and get people to see and call it out and not accept it, because there's certain things with this process that are absolutely traumatic and hard no matter what. And we should really support and give people resources for that. And then there are ones that are totally unnecessary and added on that we can put an end to. And those don't need to be there.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, fertility is such there's the cultural aspect of, I mean, culture, we could argue, influences pretty much every aspect of women's health throughout history, more than science in a lot of cases. But with fertility specifically, just because there is such that weight put on women of like, this is your purpose.
Yep.
And it's like, well, actually, it's not, not my purpose in life. It could be like one of my purposes, but it's not every woman's purpose. And that kind of brings me to my next question of like, we're seeing a shift with women, especially, women my age and the younger generations, having little interest in pregnancy or having families. And, there's obviously a lot of reasons for that, but can you speak to how fertility and quality of life are not separate regardless of your family plans?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think there was an article that I read about maternal mortality levels in the United States being totally unacceptable, especially for how much money we spend per pregnancy and birth. And one of the experts said, we treat women like they're the oily little paper cup and the baby like it's the peanut butter cup inside. And we're just like looking at women as expendable. And so when we take out the baby part of that equation, like maybe that's not an important life goal for people for any number of reasons. And even if it is, we should not treat that as the main focus of whatever we're doing. So fertility, reproductive health, sexual wellness, all of these things, I've heard you and other shows referring to it as the fifth vital sign. I think it's such a good way to know where our bodies are at, to really become experts on our bodies, to feel really empowered. And so understanding reproductive health doesn't have to mean because I want a baby. It absolutely could mean because I want to feel like I can sync up where I feel most creative or where I need to take it easy. And I want to understand why I maybe feel completely like a different person in these few days of my hormones doing XYZ. I really want to, my next course that I'm working on creating, and I know there are podcasts like yours and lots of other places where people are talking a lot more in your generation about following cycles and understanding cycles. I think it's so good because I'm 47. It was like, you're going to have a period. Don't get pregnant. Peace out. And so it's so good to listen to episodes and be like, yeah, this is what's happening with your estrogen. And this is why you might feel XYZ. It's great.
Yeah, it's so true because that is pretty much, I mean, when you're in school, that's pretty much all you get is here's your period, because it's the part that you can see. And because a lot of times the curriculums and literally everything in life is created by men for men. And that's the only thing that they can see or care about. They are not in a female body. They don't, like it's just so
they're bleeding.
Sense, yeah, right. Exactly. It makes sense why there's such a crazy amount of the crazy lack of information, because also it keeps women disempowered, which is a goal for a lot of people, unfortunately, to keep women disempowered. So yeah, it's a really good point that you bring up, that it's so important to be talking about these things and talking about cyclical health and the entire cycle.
Yeah.
Because it's one of my pet peeves when people say the cycle, but they mean the menstrual phase. Yeah. I'm like, that's not, it just sounds dumb. Please stop doing that.
Yeah. And I was listening to a different podcast that I was prepping to be on, and there was a person, it was a psychologist podcast, and they had a person talking about just domestic violence and partner harm. And as I was listening, I was like, oh my gosh, reproductive culture is like an abusive partner. It's like the gaslighting and the deferring your own preferences and the like financial abuse of it, the isolation, the self-blame. And it's just like and it's not individual practitioners. It's not like your doctor is like, I am a capitalist part of the patriarchy. It's just that it's so just it's the air we breathe. It's the air that doctors and nurses breathe when they're going through school. It's the air that we've breathed as patients and as consumers of this medicine. It's the air that we've breathed as people walking around with ovaries and or identifying as females. And so again, my goal is to start getting people to see it so that then they can be like, oh yeah, that no, I don't want that. And I love that there's that shift.
Yeah. What is advice would you have for a woman who's like trying to deconstruct from that? Because like you said, it just is societal. It just permeates. It's ingrained in us at such a young age. It's really hard to break away from those ideas
Yeah.
around pregnancy and having children and it being your purpose and all of that. So like what advice do you have for young women listening who are really struggling to discern what they actually want from what culture is telling them they should want?
Yeah.
And they're trying to deconstruct that.
Oh my gosh, there's so many ways that you could go with that. I think the main thing is just that like I think we just are so steeped in like needing to be fixed or that there's a problem. Like so often when I'm prepping for shows or I'm seeing new people, there's just such a sense of like oh, this is I think I have a lot of things or I think I have too many things or I think this is a really bad thing or and it's like this or like advertising like I have this thing, and it's like yeah, because that's what it's like to be in a human body. And especially that's what it's like to be in a body that cycles, that has distinct phases and weird complicated genetics. And when you get into it, like we all have things, I know you had your excision surgery. I have endo, I have PCOS. My husband has a genetic disorder. There's just like I think shifting from that sort of broken, fixing, problem kind of mindset to a like this is what it means to be a messy whole human, and what is in service to me being the most resourced, abundant, alive version of that messy whole human. And like if that's the goal, that's very different than like I got to fix my period or this mood is a problem or this period sign is terrible or even just lifestyle stuff like this is microplastics are terrible. You have to, and it's like, well, yeah, but is that in service to you being a whole, abundant resource person to put a lot of your energy there versus like advocacy and like culture in a way that like feeds you and community and nourishment and abundance and all these things. And then you can work on, why do we have all these sorts of industries that dump a bunch of crap that like we shouldn't have to worry about like the toxins, but we do because of the moment that we live in. So we're not going to fix that by just going to the grocery store. We're going to fix it by like making bigger cumulative choices as a culture. And we can do that in a healthy way when we're whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up a good point too with the kind of getting nitpicky about things. It's like, yeah, microplastics are bad and it would be wonderful if they weren't
Yeah.
around, but I'm not like, don't go down that rabbit hole because they're so unavoidable.
Yeah.
They're in over 99% of women's breast milk. It's 100% if you ask me. Like, I feel like there's no,
Yeah.
it's everywhere. It's all
Yeah.
over the place. We breathe them in. It sucks, but it is what it is. And you like hyper focusing on that is definitely not going to be.
Yeah, it's a very
helpful.
Buddhist thing to be like, this is causing me to suffer, and suffering is not a part of being whole and human. Well, it is, but it's not an avenue that will make you go towards the place that you want to go. It'll only lead you the opposite direction of that. So I read this book a couple of years ago. It's called, I think, Breast. There's a subtitle. The author is Florence Williams, and she made a point of not riding in cars if at all possible, and buying her furniture from Europe where they don't treat it with flame retardants, and doing all these things, really shopping at the farmer's market, and the whole list, like everything you'd want to do if you were really going down that rabbit hole. And then she goes to get her forever chemical levels checked, and they're like off the charts. And I read that and I was like, okay, as a holistic practitioner, I already kind of had a feeling about this topic, and this only confirms it. Like, you could just curl up and go fetal and be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die of microplastics and forever chemicals. Or you could be like, it is everywhere. And like, is that going to be where I put my energy? And yes, I want to, like, clothing is a huge industry that contributes to this that we don't talk about enough. Like, I shop mostly thrift, like, make choices that honor that reality, but also are like, I feel good. I love the thrill of a thrift shop hunt, and I love not playing a part in that part of like capitalism. And so it's like, how can you get creative and vote with your choices in a way that's still like, hey, I'm not going to go fetal for the rest of my life. That is not the energy I want.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, like, when I find like a hair product or something that's on the more natural side that I really like it's the same kind of idea of like, it's good and it's good for the planet. I'm not putting these horrible things down the drain, and I'm feeling a little bit better, and it works for my hair. But I also tried to switch to natural deodorant a million times. I tried like 7 different brands, and I got this horrible, painful rash every time. Up and down my arm. I just, you have to give up at a certain point.
Yeah, sanity over ideology. Like, my midwives gave me that mantra, and I love it so much. It's like sanity over ideology. There's that quest. Actually, I do think there's a couple of natural deodorants that work for a lot of people, but most of them don't. And I think like, ooh, calendula and BO, delightful, or lavender and body odor. But a rash is a totally another next level issue. I also think of the Portlandia sketch where it's like, I smell like me. That's not what most people in society want us to smell like around each other. So sanity over ideology. Absolutely.
I love that. I'm going to start saying that. I love that.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So you mentioned endometriosis, PCOS. Those are obviously conditions that like profoundly impact fertility. So I'm sure that brings a lot of those women to your doorstep, I would think. Yeah. So is your approach different with those patients, or is it essentially okay? Go ahead.
I mean, I love, again, card carrying science nerd. Totally read all the journals. I'm on all the PubMed mailing lists for every single reproductive endocrinology thing and every single psychological thing. Like, really, really, really like deeply into it. I think the main thing is like, I want people to have good, scientifically accurate, medically helpful information. The main difference is I teach them how to understand it and how to advocate for it. And I keep it in a different ratio than most people. So I stumbled on this. Actually, one of my patients sent me a podcast and she's like, Nicole, have you heard of this word? I think it's your jam. And it was a podcast about salutogenesis. And I was like, I have never heard of this word, but it is my jam. And salutogenesis, it turns out, of course, I've went down and researched it and thought about it a lot since then. But it is this idea that came about by this person who was researching Holocaust survivors, women Holocaust survivors, and seeing like what allowed some of them to still thrive and be well and healthy versus some of them not. And Aaron Antonovsky is his name, and he came up with this idea of salutogenesis, that 80% of your wellness and your well-being comes from the creation of health. Salu is into your health. To genesis, the creation of. 20%, he said, was coming from troubleshooting pathology. And I was like, oh my gosh, I spent 5 years making a program that is 4 modules. So it's not quite 80-20, it's 25-75. But my 25 is what I call the nursery, which is like, if you have PCOS, you want to understand what is PCOS in your reproductive, like I call it the nursery, whether you put a baby in it or not. That's the part of your body that's responsible for that function. And so you really want to know that 25%. If you have an issue with it, you want to have good treatments, good providers, good knowledge, good feeling empowered, all the things. But if you turn that into 80% of your focus in your life, you're going to totally lose sanity over ideology and you're just going to go in a crazy making, troubleshooting your PCOS. And it's one step forward, two steps back, because what happens holistically is cortisol and other things from, because all your systems are interconnected, are going to block what you're trying to do and it's not going to show up. So even if it's evidence-based, like this supplement and these 15 other supplements all have some research for PCOS or endo, but when you put them together and you're eating $300 worth of supplements, and maybe you're fighting with your partner because they think it's ridiculous that that's the part of the budget that's going to supplements, and you have gut rot because the supplements are a lot to digest, even if they're all technically good, and you're reading every label because you're worried about other dietary things that you're trying to do for your PCOS or your endo, all of a sudden it's like 80% of your focus is on nursery only. Very little is on the rest of you, and it just shuts down what you're trying to do. So the main difference that I do is I want that 25% to be amazing, but then I want to put 75% on being whole and being messy and being human. So for me, another 25% is what I call the foundation, which is felt safety, resourcefulness, abundance, all of the things that make our nervous system more regulated. And then 25% is what I call the house. So that is your mind body. So like if you have sleep issues or if you have digestive issues or if you have a bunch of anxiety, some squirrels moving into your attic, we're going to work on that as a part of working on your PCOS or your endo or you're trying to have a baby. And then 25%, the last 25% is the neighborhood. Like you're not a shut-in, hopefully. And so, like, what are your feelings about your closest neighbors? Are you ignoring each other or fighting? Do you feel safe in your neighborhood? Do you feel like you know your neighbors? All of that sort of stuff. So you put it together, and all of a sudden, that 25% that you're doing to try to work on your endo, say, like the excision surgery, top notch, evidence based, amazing for endo. But then you heal better and your brain actually turns down the pain signals and doesn't keep them amplified even though the lesions are gone, and you don't feel like it's, you're just obsessed over it and waiting to see if it comes back. Of course, it's there in the back of your brain. I've had surgery for endo. But you're like, I'm also going to go sing karaoke, and I'm also like really joyfully eating foods and not obsessing over inflammation in the same way because my body's not teetering as much because I did that cool 25% excision surgery that I should have done. So
yeah.
It's great.
That's so true, because the obsession for me is something I'm currently in the process of fighting, because it's been, honestly, God, it's been years now. I mean, I got my period when I was 13. They've always sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a long time now since I started, paying more attention to like hormone balance and what I'm eating and my cycle and stuff. It was really, really good for me on one aspect, but I talked about before on a different episode as well. It was really easy to get obsessive over it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the healthy way to do it, because it's like, oh no, I ate mac and cheese in my luteal phase, so now my endo is going to be the worst it's ever been this month. And of course, then I believe it. And so then
and then
you're
amplifying every little twinge is like, oh my gosh, it's bad.
Right.
And then your brain is turning up the amplification of the pain. And yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And I think it's, again, not your fault. That's what the culture tells you to do. It's like, are you also taking the supplement? Have you kept off of gluten and dairy and alcohol and sugar? And are you a martyr for your endo? It's like in my program with the 4 parts, I call it the baby blinders, but you could say the endo blinders, or you could say the PCOS blinders. You could say the fatigue blinders, like whatever you're trying to fix. If you're putting more than 25% of your energy into that, then you've got the fill in the blank blinders on, and you're going to choose insanity over balance and felt safety and resourcefulness and all these things that are really going to help you way more than what you're doing. And you're missing it. You're missing the forest for the trees. So it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
It is.
And
it
also,
really is.
I want to say something that I hear a lot too, is that when we're doing that 25%, like excision surgery is becoming increasingly a known evidence-based best practice, but we a lot of times demonize certain things in that 25%. Like, yeah, you're trying to fix your PCOS, but definitely don't do Ozempic. Or you're trying to do your endometriosis, but like if you went on birth control long term to keep it from cycling and spreading, then you're not doing it right. And it's like, no, there's a lot. Like, I'm all for using all the resources. Again, come back to like, what makes you feel the most whole and sane and human and balanced. And like, my daughter has given me permission to say this, but like, she's been on birth control pills since she's, a year into her period, because she was like flooding through everything and curled up in a ball. And I'm like, you're too young to make any big decisions on what we're going to do about this. But like, we come from generations of endo and generational trauma, which are tied. Endo is increasingly polygenetic, which means linked to multiple genetic changes that are feeding into endo. The same polygenetic changes feed into inflammatory bowel disease. So that's why there's so much crossover. And it's like, we wouldn't just say to a person with, I don't know, high blood pressure, like, well, don't use the medicine for that. You only have to meditate. And of course you want them to maybe meditate or take the supplement too, but like, why would we take certain parts of that treatment off the table and demonize them? That's not very person-centered.
Exactly. And that I always make such a point. My friend and I, my other endometriosis friend and I the other day were talking about how we get really frustrated with a lot of like creators in the online community sometimes when they're like, do this, you have to do this, or don't do this, you can't do this. And I was like, yeah, I'm very careful when I'm sharing recommendations or things that have helped. I'm very careful to say, I've done this and this is my experience with it. If
Yeah.
anyone is giving these blanket statements, blanket statements for anything, but especially for something so grossly under-researched
Yes.
that
Yeah.
even doctors don't know anything about. Like, if you're giving a blanket statement like this is what all women need to do, that's crazy. Like, that
Yeah.
is so crazy. There's no way that you're operating from any sort of data or scientific background, because if you were, you would know that that's a crazy statement.
And it probably
So,
doesn't exist, but intuitively we know that that's a crazy thing. Well, and what I love about being a Chinese medicine practitioner is like, so yeah, even from a cycling, like from a follicular to ovulatory to luteal to menstrual, like, we're different. So, but we can't even say like everyone who is mid luteal should do XYZ, because as a Chinese medicine practitioner, I know I listened to your episode with the acupuncturist and herbalist on. She did a nice job of talking about some of the different organ theories and stuff like that. It's like, well, if you're a super livery, very inflamed, hot, fiery wood starting on fire, causing heart fire kind of pattern, like, you might be able to do just a ton of ice and like cold stuff and crave that. And that might be in like, to try to be like, I should be drinking ginger tea right now. That's not that person's pattern. And that might be a general thing for that part of the cycle or for PCOS. But what if you're more in an inflammatory mode than a insulin resistant kind of presentation? Or what if you're in a Chinese medicine? I say, you could give me 100 people all with the exact same diagnosis in their nursery and put in the exact same part of their cycle, and I would still talk to them and listen. What are their preferences? What is their real-time feedback? Give them in their body what they crave, what they like, what they have the energy for, and what is the rest of their body and situation telling me. And it's still going to be customized. And like, you can't do a double-blind controlled study on that because there is no protocol. Right. So but it's just like, when you get as close as you can get with studies like that in acupuncture, they call it whole systems acupuncture studies. And it's like, we didn't do a protocol, we did customized stuff. It blows everything else out of the water. And so it's like, well, but it's not really double-blind controlled placebo. It's like, that's the point. The medicine shouldn't be able to be done like that.
Yes. Yeah. And that is also my qualms with it as well, because like, yes, I love, we need data-driven statements if we're going to apply them to an entire population. However, there is like, in this part of the world, in the West, we have a crazy emphasis on the scientific method. And it's not that it's bad, but it's a very, very, very reductionist. And it often is applied to male animals, white male humans.
Yep.
Like it's just not always it's not always the gold standard. It really depends on what you're talking about, what your goal is. And when it comes to Chinese medicine and a whole body approach and millennia of
Yeah.
ancient wisdom,
Yeah. And
you're
like
going to come in here with your lab coat and be like, no.
yeah, and I think like again, if you're keeping the 25%, like let's say the 25% is, you're working on metabolic stuff and weight is a concern, or acne or digestive stuff. Maybe your 25% is your kitchen, or you're working on insomnia. Maybe your 25% is your bedroom. That should totally be researched on people with hormones and people with brains that are exposed to hormones and bodies and
Yes.
organs that are exposed to hormones. That is a great way to navigate that part of medicine, and so important to have access and to know. I use Claude AI a lot. I am going to do a post on how to use AI to help find like peer-reviewed, evidence-based, good research. But that is kind of just 25% of troubleshooting stuff. Like the 75% is like, okay, but again, not to sound like a broken record, but you are a whole complicated, messy person, and that is great. Let's talk and work on that level, because then whatever you're doing is going to show up more.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And while we're speaking of research, I also just want to say I love that you are so, up to date with the research and you have the PubMed notifications and stuff. Cause I remember that when I was in college, that was a conversation in a few classes of that disconnect between doctors and physicians and whatever, and the research coming out. And especially when it comes to women's health and to conditions such as endometriosis, PCOS, things that I'm sure, a lot of endometriosis patients can relate to having to teach their doctor about about the disease that they're there to try and get help for. It's not very reassuring.
Yeah.
And so to actually see like physicians being up to date on the research, I think it's so important. And I know when you're seeing patients, it's really busy. It's a busy life,
Especially in mainstream medicine. Yeah. I spend 75 minutes per person, and I feel like I could do double that every person. If the world were made differently. Yeah. And that's where like AI can be so great. Yuval Noah Harari, I think he wrote Sapiens and some other really great books. He has a book called 25 Essays for the 21st Century, or 21 Essays for the 21st Century, probably is the real name. But he talks about like AI is not good or bad, it's who's using it. But like the truth is, like, if a really good longitudinal study, meta-analysis, or a good study comes out about endo, like, what are the chances that your doctor read that week? So if we can use that, if it's updated into a data bank that is the internet, and we can go and say, what is the latest peer-reviewed good research on fill in the blank, and then double check, like, are you sure this is peer reviewed? Can you give me the citations? And like, what would be some bullet points to talk to my practitioner about this? What sorts of medications would go with this? Is there anything that would be contraindicated if I also take XYZ medication already for anxiety or high blood pressure? And so, yeah, you can use that. And it's not that we're trying to replace the doctor. It's just assuming that the doctor is a human and doesn't have time to read the entire, giant amount of research that's coming out in any given moment on just a specific topic, much less multiple topics.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Even like for less specialized doctors, like your GP isn't going to be able to read everything.
I mean, the brains of a GP, it's just like, I can't, like, even as an acupuncturist, I'm so glad I'm so resourced, because I am deep in what I do. But I still learn things all the time. I'm like, wait, what is that? I got to go research. I got to go learn, which I love.
Yeah. Yeah. Lifelong student. I love that. I wanted to ask, so we talked in our pre-interview about true holism versus what you called faux holism.
Yes.
Can you unpack that?
Yeah, I love talking about this. So what I saw early in my career, again, as a sort of outsider acupuncturist, is that there was like this culture even in holistic medicine, and I was in the world of acupuncture, but it could be homeopaths or chiropractors or fill in the blank. There's this culture of like, it's still very doctor centric. It's still very like, I'm the keeper of the knowledge. It might be natural. It might be treating more than one part of you at once, like Chinese herbal medicine or acupuncture. But if it's done in a way that's kind of like bossy or overwhelming or confusing, then again, one step forward, two steps back, and that is faux holism. It's it's not as good of a medicine as it could be and should be. And so true holism is person centered. Is like, okay, I have a great example of this that I always think about. When I started my practice, I got all these raw herbs and all these herbal powders. And I was going to customize everybody's formulas, right? And I was going to give them something for their follicular phase and something for their luteal phase, and I'll tweak it. And I helped co-author a textbook on herbal medicine when I was going through school with my herbal professor. I was so fortunate, so into it. And then I'd be like, do you, Autumn, how are those herbs going? Do you need a refill? And you'd be like, no, I'm good. Because they're like gritty and nasty and expensive. And I was like, but they're so good. And I don't know how many years in my practice, I'm like, oh, this is faux holistic. Like, I think they're great and I would chug them down, but I'm a freaking acupuncturist. Like, not everybody wants that. And so I switched. When I moved my practice, I left all my raw and powdered herbs with my other colleagues that stayed at that office. And I just switched to all pills. And I very rarely, I try not to give people different formulas for different cycles, because most people have their main pattern. Like most people, like, yeah, you're going to be extra livery in certain parts of your cycle. But like if you mostly are liver chi stagnant and with a lot of fire, then let's start with just that formula all the time and see where it gets you for all your phases. And I know that's different than what a lot of acupuncturists do, but I think it's truly holistic. It's like, that's what you want. You don't want $400 worth of things that you have to rotate and obsess over. And like, oh my God, if I'm 2 days past when I ovulated and I didn't switch herbs, did I do something wrong? Especially with fertility, there's such a hypervigilance for like, did I screw it up? I don't need to do that. So faux holism is doctor centric. It's confusing. It's overwhelming. And it could be natural. It could actually be technically evidence based, but it's just not hitting the mark. Versus true holism is all those other things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I remember when you said that, I was like, that's such a good like term to coin faux holism, because I think we see it a lot, like,
Oh yeah.
in the media. Like, you come across at least one TikTok or something every day with an influencer doing something faux holistic. But I think that's a really good barometer of like, is this stressing me out? Okay, then maybe not.
Yeah. Do I not understand why? Like, a lot of people that I see for fertility, first of all, we're a very different patient population than people were 2,000 years ago, right? They didn't have clean food and water. They didn't have heating and air conditioning. They didn't have sanitation. So it's like there was such a deficiency kind of culture historically. So like everybody who comes to me from like classic acupuncturists, a lot of times they're like, well, I'm working on my kidney energy, have to boost it up to have a baby. And it's like, when you look at them, they're like not deficient because they grew up with enough food and clean water, and they haven't had terrible illnesses. And when they had the potential to get them, they were on antibiotics, which literally saves lives. And they don't get sick all the time because they have vaccinations and all these wonderful things that Western medicine and modern life can do for us. And it's like, but they are clenchy and livery and just stagnant. Like they want to control everything. They're perfectionists. I know we're both firstborn daughters, you and I. Like they are just like, this has worked for me for everything I've ever done, and I'm going to do this with my supplements, and I'm going to do it with my herbs. I'm going to do it with and it's like that does not work. And if I'm like, now you have to eat this certain way, which is just how Chinese medicine has classically said, you have to, everything should be warm. And it's like, that's not for that person. That's for a person who could get foodborne illnesses that would take them down another 3 notches when they're already deficient. Like, please eat a salad if that's what you want. Have some iced tea, especially if you live in like, I don't know, you're in the south half of states or it's summer in Minnesota. I have an ice maker at my acupuncture clinic. I love ice so deeply. I cannot even tell you how much I love ice, but I'm a very fiery, hot person energetically, which you can probably tell.
That's so funny. Yeah, because I do not like ice in my water. Like, big no for me. I just don't like it.
Yeah.
But sometimes I really want an iced coffee. And
yeah,
I'll
and
do
if you're
it.
like,
and you know what? I'll crave it less closer to my period, like I do want warmer things. And so I listen to that.
Yeah. And that's
But at
perfect.
other, yeah.
That's
Mhm.
perfect. Like, it's just like
Yeah.
knowing, like, okay, here's the idea. And yeah, all my hormones are dropping. This is technically the most deficient part of my cycle, is right before the menses starts, when the corpus luteum has shriveled up and all the hormones are dropping. So like maybe you want something that's easier to digest and takes less energy in your gut to process, which like a already pre-warmed, already pre-cooked thing would be.
Mhm.
And like that makes sense. But it's like, oh, it's summer and I'm covered up with an Afghan and I've got warm socks on and I'm like sweating and drinking ginger tea because my acupuncturist told me this is the rule. And I hate my life right now. It's just like, that's such a bummer faux holistic setup.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's ultimately one of the main messages of this podcast is listen to your body. Like
Yeah.
I want to teach women how to listen to their own bodies because I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to provide you medical advice. I want to teach people listening how to know what their baselines are, what their normal is, what helps them, what doesn't help them. And if some random person on the internet says, "Oh my God, you really shouldn't do that," and you're
Mhm.
like, "No, but I know that it helps me at this point in my life, at this point in my cycle.
Yes.
So I'm going to ignore you," instead of freaking out, because that used to be me. I used to like think I was doing something right, and then I would see one person on the internet say the opposite, and I'd be like, "Shit,
Yeah.
do I have to like go backwards out?" Like it's stressful and it's annoying and it's not helpful.
Yeah, it's really like faux holism on top of faux holism. And you just said such an important word, like for this stage of my life too. It's like where you are when you're, when you're just coming through adolescence and is different than where you are when you're perimenopausal, is different than when you're 9 months pregnant, is different than when you're postpartum, is different than when you're in your prime. And so there's just, yeah, there's your actual menstrual cycle if you're cycling. There is your Chinese medicine patterns. There are seasons in like different places where we live often. And then there's the seasons of our lives and the different things. So it's like, again, it's so insane to think that there's a one size fits all. Even if you take a sliver of those things, it's still going to have different patterns, still going to have different needs, still going to have different financial situations. Like, do you have $300 to spend on acupuncture this month? Or is that like you're not even able to get good food, or you're worried about paying for your insurance premium? Those are very different sets of priorities and very different ways to work on your wellness depending on which one you are.
It's so true. Yeah. If you are doing all of the quote right supplements, but you can't afford, high quality food,
Yeah.
and you're grabbing McDonald's every day, the supplements do not matter because
Yeah.
you're eating McDonald's every day.
Yeah. Yep.
So reallocate your resources. Yeah, that is so true. This has been so amazing. I think we've covered so much in this episode, and a lot of people are really going to get a lot out of it. And I think hopefully, I would hope that people, what they get out of it mostly is relax. Like if you're stressed about the nitpicky things, like
Yeah.
it's
Put
okay.
your 25% there. You can freak out 25%, but then the rest
Yeah.
shift.
Yes, exactly. I
Mhm.
do have one last question that I like to ask all of
Mhm.
my guests. So for all the students out there, if you could rewrite the health class curriculum that every woman deserves, what would your first lesson be?
Yeah, I think it's the ratios, like
Mm.
25-75. If you can just take that as your foundation, your kindergarten level taking care of you lesson, everything else is going to shake out and you're going to intuit so much.
Yeah, how did you come up with that analogy also
Uh,
with the nursery and the cottage and like it's
I love
pretty genius.
analogies. I love analogies because, and I think again, it's because I wasn't like, "Oh yeah, of course it's your, I don't know, like Ren my channels chi." I'm like, what? No, it's your nursery. I'll put a baby in there. So I have another how I explain Chinese medicine patterns to people is your body's like a bank account. So
Mm.
we talk about what's your starting balance, what's your income, what's your spending habits, what kind of bad investments do you get stuck in, and then what are your statements telling you? And so that's your genetics and constitution. That's your income is eating and breathing, not just what you do, but how those systems are working, because that's like having a crooked accountant if they're off. Spending and savings is lifestyle choices. Bad investments is felt safety and fight or flight versus rest and digest. And then bank statements can be acute kind of rewrites for our programming, like PTSD and acute grief. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I have a bank account. I can get behind, like, I started in a total deficit because I was a preemie and my gut sucks. So now I have a crooked accountant robbing every paycheck, and it's not my fault, but here's what we're going to do to try to work on it. And it's just like so easy, so doable.
Yes. Yeah. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
I'm
that's a
going to
whole,
start thinking of that now.
that's my house module in the program, is breaking down that step by step. There's a whole big quiz, and that's what I do with my one-on-one patients through my forms and things. So yeah, it's really doable.
That's awesome. Yeah. So where can people find you then if they want to look into that more?
Yeah. I am, everything that I have is on my website, lifehealinglife.com. And that's as opposed to doctor fixing patient, lifehealinglife.com. If you're not in my area, there's a tab for online education. I've got a lot of freebies. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got a blog. I've got a weekly newsletter. I like to do as much for free as I possibly can because I really want to change the world and this culture to better serve whole, amazing women. So thank you for having me on your show. And I have had mostly friends and people that kind of know me where I've explained these things, and they're like, oh, I don't have fertility, but I want to learn about this. People who don't do, aren't trying to have a baby are welcome to do my Baby You Want program, is with the 4 modules. And every single lesson you can just put in headaches or PMDD or whatever for fertility, and it works because it's all the same exact ideas.
Yes. Yep. Optimal fertility is optimal health.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Of course. Yeah, that's amazing. I will definitely link your website below so everyone can find that in the show notes. Thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you check out Nicole Lange and all of her amazing work, and on her email list. And class dismissed.